Yo, man, I'm not going to jail for you or anybody.
Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Hey there, and welcome to another edition of the Pest Geek podcast. I hope you're warm, because it's been really cold. We had a cold front here, and it's been a blistering 68 degrees here in South Florida. You got people bringing out their coats, boots, wearing earmuffs. It's pathetic, folks, how cold it is down here. But I hope you guys up in the north are keeping warm. It's winter, and I know what it's like. I used to live in Columbus, Ohio for 6 years. I got my share of shoveling snow and 4 feet of snow. And I understand. So believe me, when people down here, I see them with a coat on, unless it gets below 60 degrees, you can't get me to wear a coat. But I hope you're doing well. I hope you're excited. You're getting your week started right by listening to this podcast. That's right, folks. If I sound a little bit weird and I sound nasal, I'm down with the cold again. Ever since my daughter goes to school, everybody in the family is getting sick. So my son got sick. My wife is sick. I'm sick. I told my wife yesterday, I'm just feel so terrible. I just want to stay in bed and I don't want to do anything. I don't want to go anywhere. And to get me to be in bed for more than the 8 hours I go to sleep, to get me to sit down on the couch and watch television for hours on end, I have to be sick or you have to hog tie me. So, but I hope you're doing well. I hope you're doing awesome this week, taking care. And I want to give a special shout out this week. And Thomas, you're going to have to forgive me if I butcher your name, because I can't tell how this is pronounced. But anyway, I want to give you a shout out, and I hope that makes up for it. It's Thomas. It's either Ducarmi or Ducharmi. But he's a tech at Lincoln Pest Control in Smithfield, Rhode Island. He's following us on Facebook. Thank you so much for following us on Facebook. And also Rachel Olson. She's an aspiring entomologist, PhD student, student liaison, and she's following us on Twitter. Thank you so much. We got a lot of entomologists following us on Facebook. And actually on Twitter, mostly, they're following us. And I want to thank you for that, for following us and listening to the podcast. I hope that you can give me a text message me on how this podcast is really helping you, because as far as I know, you've got a PhD over me, so I don't know how much I'm able to help you. But thank you for following us and being part of this podcast. And if you want to follow us, just look us up, Pest Geek Podcast, on Twitter, on Facebook, or on the web. All one word, Pest Geek Podcast, all together. And you should be able to find us and find information on us. We're also on a bunch of other social media like Google Plus, which I don't really know what's going on with Google Plus. I'm still trying to figure out Google Plus. It's just not doing it for me, other than some of the chat rooms that are really cool with some of the people that have set up, like pest control chats and things like that. I find that very cool. Other than that, I'm not getting it. I'm really having a hard time with it. So, but I use it a lot for SEO value because it does help. It is a Google product, so it is going to help you with your SEO. But other than that, I really don't. I'm not active on it, really engaged yet. So I'm hoping to get there. I also wanted to give you the tech tip of the week. Hey, have you ever had an issue where you lost that little wand that comes in your aerosol can for crack and crevice? Or you don't have a Whitmire or B&G crack and crevice units, because those things are expensive. I mean, I had two of them. I have actually two Whitmires and a B&G, and together I think it's probably $500 to spend on that for crack and crevice. But if you don't have it and you do the occasional, you need to, or you lose the wand, and if you've ever tried to use an aerosol can upside down, it's impossible. There's a great little hack that can, it's not intended to replace a crack and crevice unit, but it can help you in a time of trouble. It's called Spray Snake. and you can get it at spraysnake.com. It's 2 meters of a spray wand or spray wand replacement that comes in a bag, and you can cut it to any length and size, and then you can twist it around, crack and corner. Like you can just use it in an area where you can't reach with your hand, like behind a sink somewhere in a restaurant where they have those tall backs, and all of a sudden you've got a little crack in there where there's a roach infestation, and you want to get it way up in there. You can just extend that little rope of spray and get it into that crack and crevice and nail it. So go to spraysnake.com. Check it out. It's a pretty cool little product. And I hope you enjoy that. Also, I want to remind you that this podcast is sponsored by Audible. And if you like great content and you like books, go to audible.com. It's actually audibletrial.com/pestgeek. Give it a try. Check it out. You'll help the podcast, and we really appreciate that. I wanted to talk to you this week about going to jail. I know it's not exciting. You're not going to want to listen to it, especially if you're one of those guys out there that just enjoys violating the label or just don't read it. And you'd be surprised how many people out there do not read their label. And there's 2 types of people that are going to go violate the label. The one is a technician that either got instructed by his boss to do something that violates the label, or a property owner that has commercial property that is doing his own pest control, and he can get up into serious trouble. So we're going to be discussing that. If you open up any label, there is a statement in that label that says directions for use, and right underneath it, it says, it is a violation of federal law to use this product in a manner inconsistent with its labeling. And most people have no clue what that means. And they do things with a product, especially people that do mostly residential. And here's where the problems are. When you do one particular type of environment, you get used to that mentally. And then you go and you switch over to another environment and you don't realize you're violating the label. A lot of people out there that I know are not intentionally looking to violate the label, but they end up doing it anyway and could get into serious trouble. Other people are just negligent, and they willfully do things to violate the label because it suits them or because of a problem with a difficult client, and they're going to lose that client, and they'll do all kinds of things to keep that client happy. And I'm telling you, folks, it isn't worth it. If you go to the U.S. Department of Justice website, there is a case on there, United States versus Biotech Management, Inc. And it says this: from October 2005 through June of 2009, Stephen Murray directed employees of his pest control service company, Biotech Management, Inc., to use outdoor pesticides indoor, contrary to instructions provided by the manufacturer and in violation of Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, known as FIFRA. Employees of Murray's company repeatedly misapplied the registered pesticide Termidor SC in nursing homes in the state of Georgia. After the Georgia Department of Agriculture made inquiries regarding Biotech's misuse of Termidor and other pesticides, Murray directed several of his employees to alter the service reports in order to cover up the misuse of the pesticide and obstruct the investigation. Murray and Biotech pleaded guilty to conspiracy, FIFRA violations, false statements, and mail fraud. On August 27, 2014, Murray was sentenced to 24 months incarceration, followed by 1 year supervised release. He was also required to pay a $7,500 fine. Biotech was sentenced to pay a $50,000 fine and to complete 3-year term of probation. I've got a link to this on the website, and you can actually see the Department of Agriculture. There's a picture of them doing a swab analysis inside that nursing home to determine if there was Termidor or what chemical was applied to the premises. And I've got a link to that in prosecutions at the justice.gov website where I got this information. This is just a blatant cover up and a blatant use of this. But you'd be surprised how much this actually does happen in the field. I have conversations where I hear, you go to all these meetings and you meet people here and there, and somebody, you ask somebody, man, how do you take care of this problem? Somebody says, bro, just use this and just apply this here and apply that there. And then most of the time I look at them and says, you realize that what you just told me to do is illegal. And the most common answer from a lot of these technicians is, bro, who's going to find out? I mean, if you don't go and you put it on the report, nobody's going to find out. But when I have a client that the customer is constantly complaining, we can't get the problem under control, I got to get it under control, because if I lose the account, my company is going to come down on me. We're under extreme amount of pressures to keep the numbers up. We can't lose accounts. The salespeople, go and sell these accounts, and we can't do what the customer wants us to do, especially in commercial accounts. The hardest thing to do is to deal in a commercial account like a restaurant with a restaurant that won't clean, or a restaurant that keeps its doors open. Like I see tons of restaurants keep their rear door open because it gets too hot in the kitchen and it's full of flies. And they want you to come in and with a chemical correct their wrong behavior. And the problem is that these clients are ignorant of what it is that governs them and us. And then when they get shut down by the health department, they go and blame us and fire us because we didn't do what they wanted us to do. And at one point, you have to look the customer in the eye and say, the reason, Mr. Customer, that you have this problem is because of this, 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 and this, and this. You need to have an inspection report that you file and you keep a file on, and you give that customer a copy of that inspection report if you do commercial property. It's required in most states. The problem is you're used to doing residential, where you do keep a record of what you apply on the invoice or whatever. And you look at the label and you're used to the label for a residential account. And all of a sudden you're in a commercial property like a food service business, and you're violating the label and you don't know it. Let me give you a common example. We're going to use a specimen label for this illustration. And a lot of people don't go through this. A lot of companies don't go through this. I have people that I know that were sent out and said, here, just apply it, spray it. And then they go and say, well, I can do my friend's restaurant. Or the customer, all the businesses that I do is not because I went out and got business. I got the business because my customer owns the business and wants us to handle the pest control in their business. And a lot of times I've turned down the business because I know that I'm not going to be able to satisfy them because of what they're doing. When I do my initial inspection of that restaurant or that initial inspection of that facility, and I sit down with my 49 points and I tell the customer, listen, in order for me to control your pest problem, you have to fix this, 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 and this. And I give them a list of things they have to fix. And then I tell them I'm limited to fixing this problem here, 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 and here, because I can't put a chemical out here, here, and here. And I can only do this, and I can only do the rodents this way. And I'm not going to put a rodent bait station inside of your business so that it can die indoors. And I'm not able to do this and this. And they're looking at me like, you don't want to do anything. You want me to fix all this and spend thousands of dollars because you don't want to do your job. And I'm looking at him and says, you don't understand. This is a commercial business. When you get inspected, you're going to have to account for all this. And they don't realize that. A lot of people, if you open up a restaurant, you got to take a class from the health department on what you can do and can't do in your restaurant. And most people take that class and they're like, I'm just glad I got through it so I can get my license, so I can get my CO, and I can open up my restaurant. Totally ignoring everything that happened in that class. And you go in there and it's been a year since they had those, the vents cleaned on top of that grill. They don't do any cleaning. It's very dirty. And they allow things to happen over time because they just don't have the money or don't want to spend the money. A lot of commercial accounts down here do not want pest control on a regular basis in their restaurant, which is, to me, it's the most absurd thing in the world that I've ever heard. You spend thousands of dollars a month in advertising. You spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in a build out. You get the place looking like you want. And then you assume that you're never going to have a pest problem because you don't have any pest problems in your house. And you don't understand the dynamics of what is happening in your business, where you have merchandise coming in from suppliers you don't know, where there's no chain of custody on those products, and you don't know that. And you don't know what truck it was put in, and you don't know what warehouse it was in, and you have no clue. I just had a client who opened up his business, and all of a sudden he had grain beetles. And he says, I have all these little tiny insects all over the place. I said, what did you receive? I said, I got an order of beans. I said, call the supplier right now, put that product outside, tell him to pick it up because he just brought that in your beans. Before everything gets contaminated in there. Get it all out. They don't understand a lot of these things. They get into business and they don't understand the pest control portion. And I don't understand why the health department does a training program that doesn't teach people about what a pest. They assume that these people are going to hire a pest control. And what they do is they hire one when they have a problem for a one-time spray, just like they do in their house. And they want to treat commercial properties a lot. I talk to so many property managers that don't understand this. They have no pest control in place for all of the businesses they have in that strip mall. They have no IPM requirements. They don't know what people are putting in there. And we don't know if the insurance is covering it. We don't know what's going on. But the moment that you go from a residential environment to a commercial environment, that label changes. Most people ignore it. I even have people ignoring in the label where it says it's a federal violation to use the product and inconsistent with its labeling. And you see what it says for use by commercial applicators in. That word right there, if you are in a state where you're not a commercial applicator and you apply this product and you don't have a license, you just violated the federal law, whether your state allows it or not. Because it's a violation of federal law to use it inconsistent with the labeling, and the labeling says it is for use by commercial applicator in. And you don't realize you just violated the label. I used to have an account which had a 60,000 square foot building. And a new property manager came in and needed to cut costs and says, we're not going to pay a monthly fee for doing pest. We're going to do it in-house. Well, what she fails to realize is that in the state of Florida, it is illegal for you to do pest control in your own building without a pest control license. And if you decide you want to do it, there is a license available. You got to send that person who's going to be the technician to take a class, pass a test, prove insurance, file for a license, and then you got to keep records just like a pest control technician on your property. Because when the Department of Agriculture decides they're going to inspect you, guess what? They're going to do analysis, and they're going to do swab analysis because they want to make sure you didn't stick an illegal product in there because you don't know what you're doing. And guess what? If you violated federal law, you're your employee, and if you directed him and he can prove it, you're going to jail too. And most people don't understand this. And it frustrates me to no end. The conversations I have with people who refuse to acknowledge it, refuse to accept it, and says, and the attitude is, who's going to find out? I mean, who's going to find out? How are they going to know? And those are things that we constantly have to deal with in this industry. The bigger the city, the more cosmopolitan the city, the more of these problems. It doesn't happen a lot in small towns. Most people will obey the law. Most people are law-abiding citizens. Most people, if you tell them and you show them why they can't do something, they will say, okay, I understand, and we got to change this, and we got to do it, and we got to fix it. They might be doing it ignorantly, but they will be willing to fix it. A lot of people just aren't. They just don't care. So when you get a product and you say, but they sold it to me over the counter. They sold it to me through the mail. Why would they sell me something I can't use? This is not their responsibility. See, it's always, the responsibility always falls on the person who's applying the product. The only thing they can't do is ship that to a state that state has determined that product cannot be used. In other words, it cannot be used in New York State. They know that, and they will not ship it to you in New York State, but they will ship you a product you can't use. It is up to you to read the label in its entirety, understand it, interpret the legality of that label. And most people have a problem with that. Most technicians have a problem with understanding a label. They don't want to read it. It's too tedious. It's too time consuming. And as far as if you're a CPO, if you're a manager, it is your responsibility to sit down with your people every time you're going to use a new product, have a class, pull that label open and say, guys, we're going to use this new product. Here's the label. Here's what you can do. And here's what you can't do. And understand, if you do it, you're going to get fired. You violate the label, you were going to terminate your employment. Keep out of reach of children. That's on every single chemical label. And you walk into a storage facility, you walk into a commercial building, and you see a product laying on the floor in a corner that somebody can just pick up. Any kid can pick up that product. People who go and buy rodenticide and throw it out in their yard to kill the rats because they don't want to spend money on rodent stations. Homeowners that are doing this. I'm asking them, well, how do you, last time I was, a guy came here, a pest control guy, and he just gave me a couple of these little pellets and he just throw it around in your yard. I've heard that from people. Infuriates me to no end. A guy on the same, if you go to the same website, you might be able to find on one that put out rodenticide in a field and killed all kinds of birds and animals. And he's in jail now. People do this stuff and they don't understand the impact on the environment, the impact on fish, the impact on birds, the impact on the health of other people. I mean, if you apply a chemical product in a building that is sealed and you don't care that your employees are smelling it, their employees are inhaling this product, that they're exposed to it, that patrons in your restaurant are exposed to this, that people who visit you are exposed to this, you got a serious, serious ethical problem, which borders on morality, I would think. And this is a common problem. I see it all the time. I see people buy a product like, Demon WP and go and spray it everywhere in the restaurant. The worst one is when they go and buy foggers. Everybody has experienced this. If you're a technician out there, you've experienced this where the customer tells you, I just fogged everything. And you're going in as a technician trying to solve their problem and you can't fix it because you don't know what they've applied. They've applied chemicals. They've applied, over-the-counter combat bait everywhere. I mean, you see it. Sometimes you go into a restaurant and there's combat bait, like there's a mile long. They used it for caulking their baseboards. And then they went ahead and did the combat, and then they put foggers everywhere. And they didn't read the label on the fogger that says you got to make sure all your pilots are off. You got all kinds of electrical equipment that can spark. And you got to shut all these pilots off and shut the gas off. And they didn't read that part, and they fogged the entire place. Not to mention that the product says you cannot put it anywhere on any surface that's going to be contaminated, where food is going to be prepared. So now you have dishes that are all contaminated with roach excrement. You have dishes that are with roach feces and bodies and carcasses and vomit. But now everything inside that restaurant is completely contaminated with a fogger. And now every dish has to be cleaned. Every glass, every container, food container, every piece of cardboard got contaminated. Every spoon, And you're going to have to wash that entire restaurant and every surface in order to comply with the law. And you just made a mess out of everything. And you want a professional person to come in and then save you. Because you did this. It says for use, and again, we're using this label for illustration. By the way, Syngenta is a marvelous company. I use a lot of their products. When I criticize a label, is because we're looking at what the limitations are. And they are limited, and this is the label they submitted to the federal government, and this is the label the federal government approved. And you can't violate it. You can't ask Syngenta to do, or any other manufacturer to do something with a product that is not on their label. If the product failed, chances are it doesn't deal with that problem, or you applied it incorrectly, or you used it incorrectly. It tells you what not to do. Don't store this material diluted. They'll buy one of those little $10 sprayers, mix it, put it in a corner, and then try to use it 2 weeks later again. They're going to dispose of the chemical. They're just going to pour it down the drain in their own restaurant. Check this out. In food handling establishments, what is food handling? Anything that has food in it. It says, but I don't understand. You can use it in your house. And you can use it and spray it in the kitchen. Why can't you use it in a restaurant? Because the label says you can't. It doesn't matter whether you think or what your opinion is in this matter. It doesn't matter. If the label says you can't do it, you can't do it. The label is the law. Don't violate it. It says, do not use Demon WP soluble packets in food areas, food handling establishments. Period. But I can use it in my house. It doesn't matter. Residential food areas. It says in a home, all food processing surface utensils should be covered during treatment and thoroughly washed before use. Exposed food should be covered and removed. Yet it says you cannot use it in a restaurant. Some have limitations where you can use it in one location as a broad spray, but indoors? No, indoors is limited to crack and crevice only. And I know some of you that are listening are saying, Frank just went off the deep end. Because you're probably not doing any of this. But I'm sure you know somebody that has. Not everybody does this, but a lot of people do. You got to use, if you have your employees using this product, listen, I used to work for a storage facility. This was back in the early 90s. In the early 90s, I used to work for a storage facility. And once a month, they had us mop down the entire storage facility with a product called Duraspan. Back then, I didn't know anything about pesticides. And they would say you pour an ounce of this into a gallon of water in a bucket, and you're going to mop down the entire storage facility. In Florida, that was illegal. Yet, they had me do it. And I didn't know any better, and I did it. No PPE, no gloves, putting it into later a wash bucket that was going to be used inside the store to wash and to mop things and touched by people who didn't know that product was exposed. Years later, they told us, oh, we can't order that product anymore. We're not allowed to do it. Why? Somebody got nailed. And people do all kinds of these crazy things and then are sitting there crying after the fact of why their business got shut down, why they got fined, why things happen. Some ignorantly did it. Some are willfully doing it. But understand, you read that label, and if you don't understand what you're reading, guess what? Don't do it. That's your best. I mean, nobody can force you in this industry to do that. And you got to be very, very careful because everybody has a recording device. Everybody's got a camera. Everybody's got a video piece of equipment now. And you could be being recorded at any time. How did this guy get nailed for mail fraud? It's very simple. You put that you use a product on your report, on your invoice. A lot of states require you to put it on the invoice. A lot of states require to keep a separate report in the office. In your software, somewhere you got to keep a record of what you applied, where you applied, how you apply it, how much you applied. I mean, like places like New York, for certain aerosols, they actually had to have the manufacturer put in there how many seconds they can hold that trigger down to release the amount of active ingredient that's required. And you literally got to sit there and count 1, 2, and that's it. That's all you can apply. That's it. You're at your limit after that for a crack. Others say a spot. Well, how big is a spot? Is it 2 by 2? Is it 8 by 8? Well, that depends on the product. A spot treatment is not always the same spot treatment on every product. You have to know that. And I'm telling you, with places that you can buy product online, people are completely misapplying this. They're not reading the labels. In state of Florida, you're limited to your own residence. Your own place of business is not allowed. Your residence, where you live, is the only place that you can apply a product. Just because you own the apartment building doesn't give you the right to apply a product. And here's what I'd like. I'm going to reach out to the National Pest Management Association, local pest management association, of why it is that they're not actively lobbying their state government and every state, every Department of Agriculture to mandate that pesticides applied to commercial buildings be required to have a license in every state. Why they're not doing this? Because I tell you what happens. I make a very clear record of what I find in a restaurant and I log it down. Why? I used to work for a company when I was a regional manager. I managed everything east of the Mississippi, totally unrelated to pest control many years ago. And we were in 80% of the population in the U.S. I managed huge territory, and I was constantly in depositions because we were in a very contentious business with subcontractors, and they were constantly going after us. And it was a very contentious, and I was constantly being deposed. And my meetings with attorneys and with our attorneys constantly were, you got to keep good record. The guy with the most paperwork wins. That's the bottom line. You got to keep good records because you go into a business and you don't know what that owner has done. You go into a house where the person is sick and you don't know what they've done. And all of a sudden you were there and that person gets sick, starts sneezing, something happens. It must have been the pest control technician that did it. CYA, you got to cover your assets. And you got to keep good records. The reason he got nailed for mail fraud is he sent that falsified report through the mail. When you send that invoice through the mail, and it becomes now mail fraud if it's incorrect. So they were able to nail him on mail fraud charges. You send out information through the mail, and it's erroneous, you could get prosecuted for mail fraud. You claim that your service is 100% safe and you mail it, well, guess what? You're going to have a heck of a time proving that in court. So those are the things that in our business, people go into business. They start a business, they start a pest control, and they don't understand any of the legalities. They don't hire attorneys to look at all this. People who actually are experienced in this field. You should have a contract. I know customers don't want contracts. It doesn't matter what the customer wants. You can put on your contract, it's on a 30-day, cancel any time, but you need a contract in writing. You need terms, conditions, and exclusions. You need to keep good records of what you applied, where you applied it, and how you applied it. From the day you started to the day you ended. because another company comes in after you and does something illegal, and they say, we didn't do it. The other guy must have done it because you got fired from that account because you weren't willing to do what that customer wanted you to do, and they found somebody that would, and now it's on you. So, again, look at the label, consult your attorneys, cover your assets, keep good records, don't violate the label. Guys, I hope you've had a great one. I hope you're doing well. I hope you prosper and be in good health. I will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.